Welcome once again to the $1 Million Nugget. My name is Marty Dickinson, founder of Speaker Speak Group and Speaker Speak Live, and I have a very special guest to me, Kenneth Shark Kinney. Now, Shark, as I've come to know him, sometimes I even have to look up his name when I hear Shark. Like, what was his name again? Oh, yeah, no, it's Shark. That's how we all know him. Welcome, Shark.
I appreciate it. How are you today?
Terrific. You are my first interview officially of 2025, and we are changing things up here with $1 Million Nugget, where instead of me coming up with some kind of elaborate introduction of my guests, I'm going to have them introduce themselves because I think it's important for all speakers in this group to hear other professional speakers introduce themselves. And I'll start it off with this question. So, Shark, who are you and what do you speak about?
So, who am I? I am a marketing from a business perspective. I'm a marketing and customer experience speaker, strategist, and advisor. I do a lot of consulting work. I run a conference that's really built around helping companies drive growth, if you will, through a lot of different venues for the background that I have and the connections that I have. But also, I spend a lot of time on weekends personally diving. That's how I'm known as Shark, because I've been swimming with sharks. It's been a passion of mine since I was a little kid. I don't dive in a cage. I free dive and scuba dive with sharks all over the world. I will do that as often as I can, especially to get time that I can pull together with what I do from speaking. So I love to speak in Florida or any kind of tropical locale where I can get time in the water the day before, go speak on a stage, and then come home to my family. First and foremost, I'm a father and a husband. If you ask me who I am, that's the most important thing in the world to me. But what I speak about primarily is marketing and customer experience to help leaders, what I say is become more curious, more fearless, be curious, be fearless, and dive deeper to really go beyond what they see on the surface level on how to look at problems through a different and unique perspective.
Yeah, that's an awesome introduction. So when I saw Jaws when I was 10 years old, I think it was, it really freaked me out. I was afraid of water. I'm still a little, if I get in some deep water, I'm checking down there for for a fin. But you went the opposite direction. When you saw Jaws, you were like, "Let's go."
Yeah, I think a lot of people that are, somewhat nutty thrill seekers like me have done things like that, whether it was, motorcycles or skydiving or martial arts, things like that. A lot of things I've done throughout my career, but there was the visceral reaction that because I often speak about differentiation and I think about it this perspective, especially with Jaws, with Peter Benchley, with what he wrote in the movie that was later created by Spielberg. It was that visceral reaction that drew people in. And oftentimes that is really what's needed for speakers in our business, is to create something not just about ourselves that we think about from the packaging that we often do, but what that reflects from a heartfelt, gut felt emotion. And that's what Jaws did. And it really changed in not necessarily the most positive way, because that put fear and it created a lot of confusion about what sharks are. And I've done thousands of shark dives, and I've never, you know, you have to have a very healthy respect for a dangerous apex predator, but at the same time, they're not on the hunt for you the way people, typically think because of the movies they've watched, which are oftentimes completely ridiculous. Most of the time, they're completely ridiculous.
Fear and confusion. This sounds a lot like the speaking business, Shark.
Yeah.
Maybe that's also why you're so involved with the whole shark background, is because it's so related to the speaking business. That's really where I got the idea for bringing you on to this program, is because you are the host of Speakernomics, and I want to bring more attention to Speakernomics for that. That is the National Speakers Association podcast. So I'd like to have you explain a little bit. Number one, if somebody was to give up on listening more than the next 20 seconds, just give us that very short description of why the Speakernomics podcast could be a lifesaver to someone in the speaking business.
I think a lot of what I do, especially, is try to put it and position it in a different way than maybe they would have thought of in the past. There are obviously a lot of different angles to speaking. I make good money on hosting a conference, and I also make a lot of money on stage. I've monetized a podcast. I've done it through books to lead me to speak. I've done it as a ghost author. So there are a lot of different ways that you can monetize your brand message on the stage and off. And I try to position this a little bit differently on the show with looking at it from different angles other than the traditional way we've only thought about only tackling being on stage. So often the goal for people is to, and I know this is going beyond 20 seconds, but so
Okay.
often the goal is only to get on stage. That's the only way they're going to make their money. Everybody wants to be Ross Bernstein and Mary Kelly because they're speaking 10,000 times a year. But there's tons of ways to do that, and figuring out that from different angles is different. I throw in the one in the having been on the corporate side of the world, I don't listen to everybody's speech only about association speeches, which are great. I love speaking to associations, but I can also make a ton of money speaking in a corporate world, which has nothing to do with how often I post on social. Because if you're working with a Fortune 200 company, for example, and you're talking about speaking to their audience, nobody from their competitor is going to come hire you. But if you have great relationships with that company, you can get 20 gigs out of a Fortune 200 company. It's there's so many things that people don't think about that really dive deeper into things that they maybe didn't know, and that's what I'm trying to explore. I learn as well, and I think that's another thing that helps me is I sit back and I listen as the host with like I'm a brand new speaker. I've been speaking on and off for over a couple of decades, but I listen to people and I learn something from everybody. And I listen, or when I'm interviewing somebody on the show, I'm listening just like I'm a first time listener. And I think a lot of podcast hosts, unfortunately, go through the motions. I like doing this with you on the first show where it's sort of broken the mold. You don't know what to expect next. And that's
Right.
important because a lot of podcasters, you can tell when they haven't read your books. You can tell when they have questions that they glossed over and they just asked Chat GPT for something with no follow up whatsoever. You got to go beyond that. You got to dive deeper into that. And so that's what I try to do on Speakernomics with people. And it's what I've been doing on interviews for years.
That's great. And
It was
I
a
like
14-minute answer to a 20-second question.
we were suspended in time, Shark. It was just exactly 20 seconds. That was perfect.
If you set it on 8.5, you'll get through that quickly. So
Right. I want to dive deeper with exactly with what you just said. I'd like you to highlight now what we're going to do with Speaker Speak Group is I'm going to feature one Speakernomics session that I could be a past couple years ago. I don't know. I have to go through and pick out some of the best ones. But what would you suggest for me to post for in Speaker Speak Group for maybe the first three sessions that I share with everybody? What are some of your favorite sessions, and why were they so impactful for you that you can remember them today?
great question. So I would say first one is the one that was on uh, it was on demo reels. And
Oh,
one of the things that we often do as speakers, and we're all guilty of this, is we will create a demo reel, and who are you going to ask next for an opinion on your new demo reel? You're probably going to ask every other speaker you know. Guess what? 99% of those speakers don't have their own conference, and they're never going to hire you. So it may feel good, but you fall into this safety vanilla of sameness. And so when I did a show on what makes up a great demo reel, I took the perspectives and pulled them all together into one show. I think the show was roughly 40 minutes or so. But I interviewed Lois Kramer, somebody that's a coach and consultant. I had several Hall of Fame speakers, several people that were killing it. I had several bureaus and agencies. I had two people from video production companies, one of them that's extremely well known in the space, and another one that does a ton of work with NSA and filming, and they create masterful reels. All those different points of view together, I pulled into that show. That was in 2024. And I wanted people to look through the same problem through all the perspectives, including the people that hire us, not just what we typically do, which is asked our safety zones folks, which might be friends and relatives or other speakers. There, I have, I hate my own demo reel the last one I did, and I was guilty of asking it. And I had friends of mine, oh, it's great, it's great. Now I look at it with a different, you know, overly biased, let's get rid of this thing and kill it and change up to a different demo reel. But I looked back on that moment when all these people were, I wish they had said this was not good enough for you. Just something with a challenging statement in that, because it didn't challenge my brain enough to go look at it from a fresh pair of eyes. Same thing that happens when you apply to a job. You know, recruiters are going to look at resumes and they all look the same, they all look the same, they all look the same. Same thing happens with demo reels. I've watched thousands of them and they blend into a sea of sameness. You've got to be challenged to come up with something unique and different to stand out. That
Wow, that's
leans into the second show, which was about differentiation, and it had 16 people. It was released the week we were at Influence in August, late July, August of 2024, and it had 16 people, including with the differentiation master, Mark Levy, who we all know and love. But it had a lot of different points of view looking about how to differentiate yourself amongst the how to stand out as a speaker. That had, again, several bureaus and agents and consultants and Hall of Fame speakers and other speakers who were killing it, but really thinking about going beyond just the packaging, because to me, a lot of differentiation is one, it's about creating that visceral moment for people on the stage, but also it's about making a difference in others. And when we think about differentiation all the time, if you ask most other speakers, how are you different? It's always, I wear red on stage, or I wear, blue shoes, or I have this book that's done well, or whatever. All that stuff is surface level. You go beyond that, it's about making the difference in others. And I was very proud of that episode because I thought that resonated well. There's a few tactics to help you do that, to get people hooked early, to make that visceral reaction, things like that. But to go dive deeper and help realize that the difference is not about you, it's about them. Third, and I'm going to just lean into this one because it's one that comes quickly to mind. There's been so many phenomenal people that I've been blessed to interview just in 2024 alone, like Harvey Mackay, who wrote How to Swim with Sharks, and 7 other New York Times bestsellers, 3 of them that hit #1. Nito Kubain, who is on the 200th show. He's, philanthropist. They named the Philanthropist of the Year award after him. There's so many legends like that. But I will lean into one because I've cited this often. A friend of mine, Hannah Pryor, we did an episode early, and she's had a very successful speaking career. But one of the things I complimented her on that she had asked me about that I've thought about often is she was worried that the show might have been too short. I think it was like 13, 14, 15 minutes. And I go through a fairly standard format that could go beyond that. But oftentimes, myself included, like I'm doing now, is you can babble too much for too long. Henna's show was so short, but it was so packed in with good nuggets that if you just wanted a quick listen that said the same thing in a shorter amount of time, to be succinct, simple, and clear is very powerful. And when I used to do stand-up comedy years ago, I always worked by the Jerry Seinfeld principle: try to take 100-word joke, if you will. And this is, I'm elaborating on, or paraphrasing, if you will, on how he used to describe it. Take a 100-word joke and get it down to 10 words. But if you can tell a story succinctly, and we saw that with Last Story Standing at Influence, but if you can tell a story, you probably believe you could tell it for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, keep an audience on the edge of their seat for 20. Very often you don't need to. People are hit with so much stimulus, like their phone, they just got a message. Oh, let me work on that for the next 2 seconds because I got distracted. There's so many distractions out there. The attention spans haven't gotten shorter, but I think we've gotten lazy with thinking that people want to listen to us for 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes, go on and on and on like I'm doing now, when I could be able to tell that story more succinctly. And that was something I loved about Henna's show, which was like maybe the third or fourth show.
That's a great confirmation in what I've been hearing too from speakers is that you have to really take your stories and make them shorter because the audiences are listening differently. They're digesting content differently than they used to even before COVID, even in the past 2 years, not even going back to COVID. So I've been really focusing on doing that, taking my more elongated descriptions, like my kids always,
Yeah.
say, why do you keep going on and on and on about this? Well, that's what I think of now is when I'm telling a story, it's like, I need to bring this down to the bare points and really shrink it down. So that is good confirming advice that we should all be doing that. If we have enough speakers telling us this is what audiences are wanting, is for you to bring those stories down. That's a $1 million nugget right there. I always look
Well,
for where are the $1 million nuggets when I interview people, and if I can just get to one, that's a golden $1 million nugget. But of course, already we've had at least 5 or 6 from you.
let me add one more thing. A neuroscientist friend of mine has written several books about behavioral science and cognitive psychology and what actually, and this is something she studies at Stanford with actual applied brain science, putting on the things, the helmets, and they measure how the brain reacts to different stimuli. And she often talks about where we often hear that we tell stories and people listen more and all that. That's great and true. But at the same time, you also hear where goldfish, we have the shorter attention span now than a goldfish. And she's gone through this over and over inside of the research to show this isn't true. Our brains haven't changed since the caveman days, but the stimulus around us have. And I think speakers have to think about something. I used to work for an agency in New York. I would love to stand in the middle of Times Square and look at all the lights and ads. How do you stand out in that big mix? Times Square 100 years ago, 2 or 3 ads would have stood out. Now it's nonstop everywhere you look. There's a giant billboard with something going. So your message has to be different than it was back then. It has to stand out because otherwise you're going to lose the audience because we've gotten lazy enough not to work harder to make that message stand out and really resonate with people, not just here's another 40 minutes to talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. Sorry, I just wanted to add to that point.
That's
The
that's
goldfish
awesome.
story.
A great addition. Thank you for that. What are you hearing from the people that you're interviewing, people in your circle? And I'm really just getting down to the last couple of questions, but this one just popped into my mind. It's been my experience that audiences want to accomplish something. They are there to experience some sort of transformation. They're in one place, and by the end of your talk, they should at least be thinking about trying something new when they leave, or even doing something new in the moment of the presenter. That's where I live. I like to get my audiences to do things and not just listen to stories. And, there's laughing is important, entertainment is important, all that stuff is still true. I'm just finding audiences appreciate to do something more than they even used to. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, no, I'm as somebody that runs a conference. I remember having this conversation with Mark Levy, who asked me, "Do I want to have the audience engaged, or are you okay with having engagement in the middle of the session?" I was like, "Yes, please." That's what I hear over and over from meeting planners as well when they hire me to speak at different venues. The audience engagement is key. That can come in many different flavors. That doesn't mean that you have to run out in the middle of the audience and get everybody to a hula hoop together or break a board together. That's not what it necessarily means. It could be that there's somebody I know who uses surveys and polls exceptionally well. Go scan this QR code and let's get active with how we're going to vote on, in the immediate ways we do, sorry, the immediate presentation, and then talk about what the vote was. Things like that are much they add a lot more content and flavor than just running through a speech that's
Right.
probably well written for 45, 60 minutes, and then you're just sitting in your seat waiting. It's hard for people today. I have ADHD and I have to keep I need a lot of stimulus to keep going. So when I sit and listen to somebody, unless they've written a tremendous speech, and we've heard tremendous speeches, we all have. I credit Lois Kramer over and over and over with talking about this with from a differentiation standpoint for speakers. Start with a great speech. You know, if you have a great speech, you can do a lot of your marketing a lot differently, but you've got to have a great speech. And if you even if you have a great speech, try to add in some audience engagement. The other thing that I'm hearing a lot, and a lot of this has been offline conversations with a lot of speakers as well. We tend to believe that if we create kind of that field of dreams, if you build it, they will come. Even if you get a great speech, they're not coming out of the woodworks looking for you to speak about web marketing today. They might have
Right.
been in the past, but they want what's on chapter 5. And you specifically almost have to engage in there, whatever that topic is. I'm making up chapter 5, but a more narrowed down. And then you have to get in front of them and disrupt them a bit with better marketing, advertising, whatever. There are a lot of speakers that I know that are killing it, that are making 3 to 10 phone calls a day, sending out 3 to 10 emails a day. And they're doing that not over the amount of time it takes for them to get frustrated and bored with it, which will come quickly. The
Mm.
lack of results don't happen overnight, and they won't happen in a week. You're planting seeds and you're farming this, but you don't give up farming. You got to farm for at least a year or 2 or 3. And then you go hunt, you pick up the phone. So it takes a combination of long-term farming and hunting. Pick up the phone, call meeting planners, pick up the phone, tell people that you're looking for something, not just posting something on social media and waiting for them to come find you. And I'm hearing this over and over, and it's something I do as well. I've been in performance marketing most of my career. I go out and interrupt, and that's something that helps me get noticed by meeting planners events. That doesn't make everybody comfortable, but it is something that I'm hearing from people that you wouldn't think necessarily would have to do that. And that's a just shows you that there are a lot more speakers out there. It's not getting easier, it's getting tougher. And if you want to differentiate yourself, it even if you have a great product, sometimes it takes something additional to get in front of the people and the audiences that you want to serve and the meeting planners you want to attract.
Right. That's so important for new speakers and even established speakers to understand that the best speakers out there, the most popular speakers out there, are still working their butt off to get on stages. So they are not just sitting back and collecting and just waiting for people to call. That's so important. And
Well,
it's
you talked about 2 people. Mark Hunter, you talked about Mark Hunter does that consistently, and another one that's his friend makes me think of it's Meredith Elliott Powell, president,
right.
the chairman of NSA right now, the 2 year period. She is notorious or infamous, if you will, for calling people and emailing them all the time. Now, that's not brand new cold calls. Some of it is. Some of it's reaching out to past clients, but she's always reaching out. Same thing with Mark.
Yeah. And I think it also reassures why it is so important for speakers to be listening to the Speakernomics podcast because this is stuff that's all coming from people you've interviewed. That's what's amazing about this. They can sit in on these interviews and hear it firsthand. And it's not just about what used to work 10 years ago. They're talking about what they're doing today. I mean, if you want to be successful as a speaker, you need to do what successful speakers are doing and follow them and hang around them and watch what they're doing and try some things for yourself and see if it fits into your model. I mean, everybody's different. What works for them might might not work for you, but you never know until you test and try. So I'd like to ask you this, well, coming up to our final questions here. I'd like to ask you, what do you have in store for 2025 with your experience with this podcast over the past year or more? What are you envisioning for 2025? Where are you going to take this podcast?
Uh, I'll answer that in two ways. One, because I want to lean back into something that I did mention before, and you mentioned it earlier, and apologies, I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to keep this for 2025, and this goes back to the last question as well. What will help people as well is relationships, diving into those relationships. And if I'm doing that more with people, it's less about call calling. It's about not a transactional call to people. It's building relationship. And if they do that more, then it'll help them think less about it just being a transaction, because meeting planners don't want that. Where it'll go in 2025, one, we're going to have a website for it. I still believe that, and I think you're doing a phenomenal job with yours. There's so many great podcasts and shows and everything about this, but I obviously it's because of NSA. I think NSA has the potential to have it has the best speaking show for professional speakers on the planet, in my opinion. I'm biased because I'm the host and I was a listener before, but they have obviously the community as well, with some people that are really killing it. And I want to help elevate that to make it well known. What I love about it is you can go find them to get a membership. You should join. It's providing education, but they're not selling anything as part of it. Something we talked about recently as well, and that's one thing I love. But I think part of what I'm going to try to help them do more next year, other than elevate the show, is to dive a little bit deeper with more things that people can tactically use to build their business. And that's really important to me. Whenever I listen to people ask them the things that I ask them, I try to recite three takeaways at the end of every show. It's while I'm listening to them, I'm sort of writing stuff down, and in real time, I say what I heard and what I think will help you grow your business. I need to do an even better job of that to help elevate others. And third, most importantly, helping the show, helping with great advice. But I think my goal is really to help whoever the guest is, elevate them. I love being able to promote other wonderful, smart, good people. I love it being about me as well. It's fun to be the host, and I get to speak on stages a lot. But I love helping someone else to get recognition for the expertise they bring, or for the important message, the differentiated message, and helping elevate them. And that's not necessarily it's probably somewhat spirit of Cavett, a little bit of spirit of shark thrown in for me personally. But really, I just think helping build that pie bigger, that is true to NSA, is something I just adore helping them do.
That is such a worthy mission. And my last question for you, because I want to do the same for you and get you the recognition you deserve. It takes a lot of work to put on a podcast, folks. If you have not done it before, your dedication to NSA members and members to be is just phenomenal by your effort through this podcast. And I should say it again. I don't think I said it before. You do not need to be an NSA member or have ever been to an NSA meeting to listen to the NSA Speakernomics podcast. So make this part of your playlist that you check in every time. And how does someone subscribe so that they're alerted to Speakernomics? And how do people reach you? So let's have that be our final discussion.
Perfect.
What do people
Yeah,
do
well, that's
next?
great clarification, because although I do primarily interview, community members in NSA, it's about professional speaking. It's not necessarily an NSA commercial by any chance. I don't know that we even bring that up probably enough, but subscribe on all your favorite podcast channels: Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We've added to Amazon Music and some other channels. It's also on YouTube. I do a video podcast as well for Speakernomics. So if you go to NSA's page, it will be there within a few weeks. Hopefully, by the time this airs, speakernomics.com will directly point to a specific Speakernomics website that will have all the guests and episodes over the last year plus because I've got video on all those. It's good for SEO and backlinks as well. How they connect with me is kennethkinney.com. But if you Google Kenneth Shark Kinney, you're going to pretty much find me anywhere and everywhere, sometimes underwater, sometimes on a stage.
All right, great job. Thank you for being my guest on the $1 Million Nugget. And everyone, go check out Speakernomics. You won't even have to go there on your own because I'm going to be posting these as I see opportunities to do that in the Speaker Speak group. And I would love to get the message out about this podcast as much as we can. So thanks again for being with us.
Honored.